Hello and welcome back to the Fast and the Curious for our penultimate penalties and punctures race debrief of the season. I'm Betty Glover. Christian Hugel is still ill. He's resting up in bed, so we hope you get well soon, Christian. Greg James is busy on radio duty because, you know, he does that radio thing, doesn't he? But it's okay, guys, because we are joined by a very good friend of the podcast, one of the best analysts in the paddock. There is literally, and I mean this, literally no one that I would rather go through all of the action from Qatar with than former race strategist and F1 TV's Ruth Buscombe Divey. Ruth, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I am Christian Hugel or Greg James.
Which one would you rather?
Oh, I've got to be Christian. Got to represent for my F1 fan. You know, no offense to Greg. You know,
for the Formula One brain, you can be Christian. How are you, by the way? Because I obviously follow you on Instagram, and you are everywhere. I feel like you've been to pretty much every single race. The last race you were at was Vegas, and it looked like you had a spectacular time.
Well, I love Las Vegas. I've always loved Las Vegas, even before there was a race there. So back in 2013, which is showing how old I am, we had a strategy working group meeting at Ferrari where my team principal at the time, Stefano Domenicali, was asking about what races, like what locations would be good races. And I did like a George Russell style, I think it was 27 slide presentation on why we should go race in Las Vegas. Yeah, so last year when they were giving out the sparkly jackets, I got given one as for my services to Las Vegas. I'm sticking with that. I haven't fact checked it, but I'm keeping it. But yeah, I absolutely love Las Vegas. I used to go quite a lot in my 20s when I was a poor graduate because the maths of poker is the same as the maths of race strategy. Fun fact. So there's a lot of race strategists that go there.
Really?
I'm not going to put their names on blast, but I've seen quite a lot of them there.
Oh my God. So this is how you get good at race strategy then? Just get yourself off to Vegas.
Or vice versa, like you get to monetize your race strategy. So yeah, we like a mathematical STEM-based holiday.
Oh my God. So okay, right, hold on. So you're one of the reasons why Vegas is a thing.
I think that's a bit of a stretch, but we can run with it if we want. We want this. It's Monday morning.
We're going to run with it. And then secondly, you practice race strategy by going to Vegas and doing some gambling.
Well, yeah, counting the mathematics, because, you know, race strategy is all about stacking the odds in your favour and making lots of good mathematical decisions across the season, as your friend Randy Singh has told you more than once. So, you know, even though you can't win all the time, but if you win a lot and play a lot and risk a lot over time, you'll win a championship or enough money to go for dinner somewhere nice. So
I can't think of a role that I'd be worse at. Like, genuinely, I would be terrible. Let's talk about Qatar then, because we've got plenty of penalties, punctures, and listener questions to get through. It was absolute chaos, Ruth.
Yeah. Qatar always is. Like, if you remember last year, it was one of those days where, like, you just kind of forgot what sleep felt like. I remember for last year's race with the new regulations and things like that. So, I mean, at least it wasn't too warm this year, like on the plus side.
Yeah, on the plus side. But also, all of this means that the Constructors' Championship is going to go down to the wire as well. So we're going to talk about that because that's exciting. But let's start with the podium. Max Verstappen won, having started in second. We'll get to the drama around that in a sec.
There's drama everywhere, right? There's literally, other than my friend Joe, there's drama everywhere.
Yeah, literally. Charles Leclerc got second place, Oscar Piastri third. But it really is one of those podiums, isn't it? That you look at it and you're like, this isn't the full picture.
Yeah, there's someone that bet on that podium that's a very happy chappy somewhere out there, aren't there? Like, whoo, it's got good odds.
Let's talk about Max first then. Stunning drive from Max Verstappen, showing us why he's a 4-time world champion. How impressed with his drive were you?
Very, to be honest. I mean, I think it was the sprint qualifying one on the thing. We're like thinking, oh, maybe he's had a lot of fun in Vegas and he's just taken his, like, you know, foot off the gas a little bit, which also like a lot of world champions do. Lewis famously did it, you know, when he'd won too early in 2015 and then ended up losing out initially to Nico, and then apparently not. He just needed 3 laps, and then stunningly, like, being able to kind of outperform the machinery, which he's done all year.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think if you annoy him like just the right amount, Like you tend to like people like these world champions, like if you think Lewis Brazil, Max Brazil, I think he was like suitably annoyed, like just the right amount that there was absolutely no way he wasn't going to be leading into turn one for me.
It's like poking the bear, isn't it? And that's what we need to talk about, because he was very angry, wasn't he? He made some pretty strong comments about George Russell. He said he's lost a lot of respect for George and he's never seen someone trying to screw someone over that hard, which is so scathing, isn't it? Now, this was all after Max got a penalty and was dropped from first to second after it was ruled that he drove unnecessarily slowly during the qualifying session, impeding one of Russell's laps. And he was clearly upset by whatever George said when they went to the stewards to discuss that incident. What do you make of those comments? Because they're bold, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the thing is the drivers' briefings are private, other than the random ones we get on Netflix every now and again. But they're private for a reason. You know, they're private so the drivers can raise concerns, qualms, you know, kind of bring up points. And the only other people that get to go in these meetings are your sporting directors. And so there is always a political agenda from drivers in terms of trying to get things changed to the way they want them or not. You know, like there's certain drivers that are always more vocal in these meetings, of which George is always one of them. You know, there's other drivers, you know, Kimi Räikkönen, it won't surprise you, never spoke, never said anything in these meetings. You know, and do you know what? I think he's, you know, he's annoyed about the penalty because the penalty itself was a weird penalty. You know, like it was the first time since Hulkenberg 2016 that a one-place grid penalty was given out, and it comes off the back of, you know, Sao Paulo. Obviously, it wasn't just him that had, you know, penalties that, let's say, you know, from an engineer's perspective, don't fit the standard precedents, which is all what rules are. You can agree with the rule, you can disagree with the rule, but like the Hermione Granger I am, you have to just follow the rule book. Whatever the rule book is, you have to follow it. And if you break the rules, even if you don't think it's fair, you know, as long as the precedence is set and as long as there's consistency, even if you don't like it, you kind of have to deal with it. And I think the second that you start kind of adding things that we haven't seen in nearly a decade, it's naturally going to rile people up. And then, you know, you go into a meeting preloaded. We don't know what was said. You know, we don't know who's in the right on that one. You probably could get one of the other drivers to dob in, but I don't know. So I don't know whether or not his annoyance was valid or not. So I'll be a good teacher and say, I think that just the application of the rules needs to be studied and make sure that we don't, you know, annoy them so much. And it's quite late. It's probably past his bedtime, probably past everyone's bedtime. They just go to bed.
I know well, that's the thing, isn't it? They probably do just need to go to sleep and sort of get rid of that anger.
I'm cranky. If I'm hangry or I'm tired, I'm cranky. I say things I don't mean.
Yeah, I do too. But I am enjoying this like little spicy relationship that is starting to go on between George and Max, because after Vegas, George was very much like, we need to take it to Max next season. We need to really fight with him and it's starting to build between these two. And I'm enjoying it, Ruth.
Yeah, well, you know, if the Mercedes is in a position to beat the Red Bull next season or the season afterwards, you know, you want him to be that leader role. You know, you know as a driver that Lewis is leaving and you are going to be, you know, at least initially guaranteed to be that like kind of mainstay driver, the kind of leader figure, whether it's said or not. You know, you have a rookie next to you, you know, and it's nice that he wants to like, you know, not be intimidated by him and like show it out on track as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the spicy bit of the weekend sort of covered. But talking of penalties, we need to get into sort of the huge monster of a penalty that Lando Norris got for failing to slow under those double waved yellows after Alex Albon's wing mirror fell off and was in the middle of the track for 3 laps or so. There was so much to get in here into sort of how this was handled and how it affected the race. So Lando was given that 10-second stop and go penalty, which, Ruth, that is the worst penalty that can sort of be handed out.
Yeah, other than it's a straight disqualification. So there's one level more, but like that is, it's not good.
No, it's not good. So he said sorry to the team, says he didn't see the yellow flags at the time, and it basically took him right out of the battle for the win because he ended up finishing 10th. Massive blow to him and McLaren because they were arguably the fastest car, really. Toto Wolff says that he thinks they were brutal. Do you think that it was too harsh, that penalty?
Again, based on precedents, yes. based on, normally the level of penalty that's given. It's not, that one's not completely out there. We have had, even that morning in F2, I believe someone was given a similar penalty for a procedural issue. So, and things do change with different race directors. It is a brand new race director. For me, you don't always get to see those things. We don't know, we don't know exactly, sitting at home, what camera angles the teams had access to, or whether it was reported where it was on track. But obviously wing mirrors should be on cars, not on the ground. So, first off, in an ideal world, you want things like that neutralized as soon as possible from a driver safety and from a sporting perspective. And I think that, the point with that one is that Lando did make a mistake. And so there's no one really can debate whether or not, including himself, he deserved a penalty. He did deserve a penalty. You have to slow under yellow flag. So I think least that is like one point. Then the level of severity, actually the way that the penalties are written, is that it is actually up to the stewards. Now, the way they hand them out is normally to do with precedence, a bit like law, that they typically hand out the same level of severity for the same level of kind of crime, if that makes sense. But it is actually up to them. So it's actually written down like that it is their wording. But yeah, no, I mean, I felt really sorry for him. I thought his accountability and how much he really impressed me this weekend, actually, in terms of the way that he held himself with just giving the sprint win back to Oscar, even like going against team orders to do that, and apologizing straight to the team at the end of the race and saying, I'm sorry, I ruined it, that's my fault. I think like that's also like something that I think has impressed me more than some of the comments that we've seen him say in previous weekends that I've been a little bit disappointed in.
I do want to ask you though, Lando afterwards says that he didn't see the yellow flag. Why do you think that was, from your perspective and your experience?
So basically it's a lack of kind of concentration from a driver. So it's a driver error, not a deliberate one, not like a kind of an antagonistic one.
Right.
It can happen just basically if you're not 100% focused on either, like, usually you have the yellow flag that flashes up on your steering wheel and you have the marshalling post. If you just are like not looking at the time when you go through it, or it comes really close to when you're there, like you can miss it. There's like a famous one where Seb missed it actually in Brazil 2012, and there was a light panel, but Ferrari, we found it too late. That meant that like we couldn't like protest, and it was there for a fraction of a second, and technically you could have maybe put an argument in. I believe Brazil 2019 when Carlos had the first podium for McLaren, where that the kind of the third place trophy went up and down the pit lane like 3 times, was another case of like there being yellows and like just certainly it's a driver error. It's not a malicious driver error most of the time, we hope. It's just like sometimes you're not concentrating, and which is why normally especially in something like qualifying, you'll hear on the radio sometimes saying like yellow, but sometimes the yellow on track, so flags always take precedence, so anything on track beats anything on our timing layer. So and sometimes there is a tiny delay just because there's a human being. If a marshal sees something, they will either throw a physical yellow or a light panel, depending on what you have at the circuit. And that might take a small delay to when it gets back to the team. So there can be scenarios where the team don't have the information at 100% the same time. Same things like a red flag. Obviously, if there's a big accident, they'll throw a red flag and then there'll be a delay as that's then translated to an electronic thing. So again, it's one of those ones where from the outside, you don't know if the team forgot to warn them. From the sounds of it, doesn't sound like it's that situation here.
Right.
But normally it's just like, it's just kind of a little bit of a driver error, a little bit of a lapse of concentration, not looking the right thing, looking left when you should look right when you cross the road, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I do that all the time.
You would so get that penalty, Betty.
Oh my god, I'd get a penalty every single. I'd be a nightmare. I'd be getting disqualified.
That's the white line, Betty. Again, don't cross the white line, Betty.
But that bit of the race was just absolute carnage, wasn't it? We had punctures. We didn't know when the safety car would be coming out. For someone sat on a pit wall, that must have been absolutely insane. How would you have dealt with that moment?
Well, it's your responsibility to kind of not panic when you're, obviously F1 is entertainment, and it's for everybody else to enjoy it and jump up and down. And when you're on a pit wall, it's your responsibility and literally your job not to panic. And actually you're judged by how you are in those moments. You know, like actually the reality of it as a strategist is 95% or more of what you do you won't ever be remembered or judged for. And largely the moments that we are judged and remembered for as strategists are the worst moment of our worst day. So actually we spend a lot of time training for that, you know, that last moment and enjoying that. And, you know, you're the ones that have to keep calm and make decisions because, you know, as we saw, there's still points to playing for, and you can kind of get annoyed or get angry later after the race, but when you're in it, you know, there's still something to gain or to lose. You can still make it worse, obviously, in terms of, you know, once you have compounded errors. I would hope and I would imagine that all of the strategists, certainly all the ones that I know, would be there and consummate professionals during that scenario and trying to make the most out of it. And as you heard from the race engineers, none of them were shouting on the radio. They were all calm. Obviously you don't get to hear we don't at home don't get to hear the strategist, but yeah, they're all good at their job, so they will have been probably calm and trying to make the most of the situation and probably leading through the sporting direct regulations, trying to work out what was going to happen next.
Yeah, what is happening? Why is there no safety car after 3 laps?
Well, in that scenario, actually, they would have been on the phone, well, on the radio to race control saying, are you going to bring out a safety car? Like there's gravel on the track. As you could hear, you know, or not gravel on this occasion, there's a rear wing. So there is like things that the teams do. That's usually the sporting director's role, is to kind of phone into race control, because there could be things that like race control don't spot as quickly. So for example, if you were Alex Albon and you're Williams, they know the wing mirror has gone before the average car on track. So they probably would have like called into race control saying, we've lost a wing mirror on the main straight between turn 1 and turn 2. Our car is safe, because they know like the car is in an unsafe state. So it's things like that like, you know, as a team, part of your job is to kind of also report if it's you as well. So yeah, but I agree. I think maybe, Betty, don't be a race strategist. I think there's a lot of good jobs for you.
Yeah, maybe not this. Maybe this isn't my skill set.
No, I think you've got a great future in a lot of different roles. I feel like.
Thanks, Ruth. Like what?
Head of marketing. I feel like you can market. You could bring in all the sponsorship.
Yeah.
You can like sell. You can like
bit of PR maybe. Like
PR, yeah.
That.
Team principal. Get all the share. Team principal.
I think I could do team principal.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I could blag my way through that.
Don't tell Greg I said that.
Yeah. But just staying on, obviously for McLaren, they're incredibly frustrated. They've asked for there to be an inquiry into the penalty. What are they going to be hoping to get out of that?
Well, probably an answer as efficiently as possible, because, you know, we live in a cost cap era. So they don't have infinite people. So, you know, it's still race week. And they still have the opportunity to win the Constructors Championship for the first time in 25 years. So, you know, they're gonna obviously want to get, you know, some kind of like their points back or an open investigation for whatever they, you know, whatever detail they have. You need to kind of prepare a defense for those things. You need to or an offense, which involves a lot of going through kind of previous precedents, saying, okay, there was one from like Aston Martin where they found like 1,000 examples of where people were touching a rear jack and therefore they shouldn't be given the, but, you know, someone's got to go through, or a group of people have got to go through, prepare that defense, submit it. And usually your team will actually have lawyers that will help like actually write the wording, and that'll be done with a combination of kind of your strategy sporting group, depending on how it's set up. But that is a lot of work. That's a lot of work to do. And, you know, they don't have infinite people. It's not like you have like a group of people like sat there waiting to do this. That'll be the same group of people that need to do the post-race analysis from Qatar in terms of performance, not in terms of, you know, spice, and the pre-race preparations ahead of Abu Dhabi. And so they're going to need to, you know, balance really, you know, chasing that with actually getting ready to go and fight again. And that's often why you see when teams drop things, you know, it's not because they don't necessarily think they can win, it's just because they've got limited resource. And actually, like, if you're fighting over, you know, 3 or 4 points or 10 points, but you've got a 5% chance of winning based on previous overturn rates versus actually putting your focus into nailing this weekend. Obviously, it's completely up to the teams how they use their resource, but it's a very different world than it was, 10 years ago before the cost cap, where you would just, you can just add and add and add resource, and you'd have big teams that could do this in parallel, and it would never impact your, race weekend preparations.
That's such an interesting point that I hadn't actually thought of. We're going to get on to the constructors in a sec, but we've got some questions for you from some of our listeners. Are you ready?
Yes, born ready.
Okay, so Sarah has asked us a question about all of these penalties. She says, there were those ones for Max and Lando. Lewis Hamilton picked up one for speeding in the pits. Lance Stroll got a penalty for almost taking out Alex Albon. She says, there seems to be a lot of penalties this week. This might be a silly question because I'm sure they all know the rules, but how much focus is there from the teams to make sure the rules and specific punishments are drilled into the drivers?
A lot. They go through, I won't do it now because it's probably not that interesting, but I can recite the pre-race briefing where you're like, if the light goes out in the safety car, you go there. If it does not, you go, it's almost like a school, assembly. The drivers have it. We get specific rules for each race weekend called the event notes that are if you go off in turn 1, you need to navigate these 3 bollards and come back on in turn 4. And we will say this to these drivers over and over and over again. They go to that drivers meeting, the spicy one. It's normally not that spicy. And they'll discuss this and maybe they'll move a bollard. They have that information. When you have a track like this, track limits, people having to do different things. You've got some people towards the end of the season with nothing to lose, some people with everything to lose, some people with nothing to gain. So you also get a spike in safety cars, accidents, and crashes always the last couple of races of the season because people are either out of contract or completely secure. It all kind of leads itself to drama.
Yeah, it does. James also has asked a bit of a similar question. You've sort of answered most of this, but I think what James really wants to know is, does the amount of those big penalties sort of reflect the inconsistent stewarding as well?
I think not necessarily the amount, because, we've had occasions where lots of penalties have been handed out correctly. For example, so I don't think it's, I think you have to take each individual, this is a very boring engineering answer, but I think you have to take each individual case as a one-off, and you have to look through it and judge it. And it's not you can have races where no one does anything wrong. It's not like we have a quota, or you hope we don't. I think the number of penalties isn't necessarily indicative of bad or good stewarding. Certain track layouts you just get more. Somewhere places like Austria, where the way you race, it just leads to rubbing and racing style racing. You're always going to get penalties there. You'll then go somewhere like Monza, and the way that people overtake is on the straight. So you don't really get near anybody.
Right.
So you're more penalties. So you want more now. I think it's indicative of the track layout, where we are in the season, and the nuances of what made that race a race as to why we were in the situation. The actual each individual penalty, you've got a deep dive into work out, was it right or was it wrong? Because arguably, Lewis made a false start and he got a penalty. That one wasn't it's really sad if you're a Lewis fan, but it's sad for Lewis, but there's not really any debating that was not a correct penalty that was handed out, for example. So and I think the kind of Stroll one as well looked quite he did actually cause the accident as well. So I think there's you have to take each individual one if you want to be a steward when you grow up.
No, I don't.
Hello, Greg and Betty here, interrupting this episode with a reminder that even though we're closing in on the end of the season, there's still a chance to get up close to the world of Formula One. After the racing finishes, you should head to the F1 exhibition. It's toured all over the world now. It's at the XL Centre in London. Betty, you were at the launch event. Was it good?
It was very good, Greg. And actually, if you sort of have a free few hours in your day and you're wondering what to do with yourself, you need to go to this. If you love Formula One or you're just interested in the sport, sort of getting to know it, it is like walking through a sort of encyclopedia of the sport. You learn so much. So you could spend all day in there if you wanted to and you didn't have anything else to do.
Christian Christian would spend a week in there. Can
Yeah.
you Airbnb it? Because if you can, he would.
I think he would bring his sleeping bag and camp in the corner, wouldn't he? And just sort of stare.
I think he'd take a little Wendy house
Yeah.
and just sleep next to his favourite car from the old days.
But do you know what? It is so cool because there's like so many different immersive rooms that sort of take you through the past, the present, and then also like the future of Formula One. And you can see so much detail. If this and you're a bit of a geek, Greg. You pretend you're not, but you really are a bit of a geek.
No,
You love seeing like the details about how cars are designed and all of that stuff. So you would love it. But one of the most fascinating bits for me was seeing the Romain Grosjean, the car that he obviously crashed in at the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2020. And they've got the sort of remains of the car in the middle of a room, but it is fascinating to see. And then on the screen, it sort of takes you through how the crash happened and what happened there. And it is honestly so good to see because he survived. He walked out of that car, which is so impressive. So,
well, if you're a sicko like Betty and you want to see a car crash, or you might want to hang out with Max Verstappen's actual car from that 2021 title battle and Ayrton Senna's 1988 championship-winning McLaren, then it's all there for you. They've recently extended the exhibition to the 2nd of March 2025 because it's so, like, due to popular demand. It's also selling out fast, so if you're thinking of giving yourself a little end-of-season treat, or it does work out as the perfect Christmas present for the F1 obsessive in your life, then head to f1exhibition.com. That's f1exhibition.com and have a nice time. And now, back to the broadcast.
You mentioned Lewis Hamilton, and I do just want to ask you a quick question about Lewis. It is really sad, isn't it, to see his end of, the end of his season, the end of his time at Mercedes sort of playing out in this way. And it just feels like Lewis has sort of lost his head a little bit, lost his confidence. What do you think's happening there?
I mean, I think there's a lot just to be said about the environment you're in. And if you go to work and you're miserable at work, you probably don't perform as well as if you go to work and you love the people that you're working with, you're having a great time, you're having a lot of success. It's very clear that, he's not performing at the same level that he was, especially in qualifying, a couple of years ago. I would say if you look back at the way that he drove in Silverstone, for example, which was stunning, and actually even the way he drove the Las Vegas race. Now, obviously, he didn't do as good a job as George in the qualifying. George has thoroughly beaten him in qualifying this year. But in the race, he was the fastest car on track by quite some significant amount and drove amazingly. So I think it's, compared to Lewis's reference, everything that's not winning is a failure, right? Because we're so used to him winning absolutely everything, and this will be his worst season by a country mile. But I think also we don't always get to write our endings. In terms of when Titans leave the sport, a lot of them are not great exits. And the great thing is he's not actually leaving the sport. He's moving 20 meters down the road, in the pit lane at least. And we get
changing colour.
Just changing colour. I think red will look great on him. I'm personally looking forward to seeing all the collabs. I think we won't truly know where Lewis is. He said himself, I'm worried I'm getting too old, blah, blah, blah. I think I've lost it. Don't know why I'm so slow. But then other days he comes and he says, yeah, don't know why I said that. I feel fine. And I think that's it's really human of him. I certainly how I feel. I think that's how most of us feel. Sometimes we feel on top of the world like we got this, and other times we suffer with self-confidence and question whether or not we're good enough. I had a conversation with him back in February, and he had imposter syndrome, and as well as me being what?
It's mad that Lewis Hamilton gets imposter syndrome.
I was it made me feel really good because I was if literally the greatest driver of all time, statistically on paper, at least at that point, has imposter syndrome, then it's completely fine for me to have imposter syndrome. And actually we're all just really similar, and there are similarities to us and differences. And I remember saying I'm not sure I'm ever going to win a race again, and then I was crying like a baby in Silverstone when he was. And so I think it's one of those things that I actually do have to say, bravo that he is coming out and saying this. I think he's been a huge advocate, especially for men's mental health. It's still in the UK, the biggest killer of men under 30 is suicide. And actually, mental health is such a huge thing. And having someone that is so such a titan of the sport, coming out and saying, I'm struggling, I have self-doubt. Obviously, thankfully it's not massively serious in his scenario. He's just not worried. He's not the actual greatest of all time anymore. But it's great to have someone, I think, come out and say it, and it's really brave. I think it's incredibly brave.
Yeah, and be honest.
And I personally hope he's wrong, and I hope that next year when he gets in a Ferrari, gets in his little rad, like, I think him and Charles are going to get on like a house on fire. I'd love watching the race yesterday. I was like, oh, look at them go. I think they'll bond over dogs and overtaking, and like fashion. I hope we're wrong, and I hope that he just changes as good as the rest.
It's so hard, isn't it, though, because they say the most successful people get imposter syndrome, and Lewis Hamilton is the most successful one of the most successful Formula One drivers of all time, isn't he? So it must be so hard for him adjusting to not winning and not being on top all the time and actually struggling. And he must think, God, what on earth is happening? But yeah, we'll see what happens next season. Let's talk about the Constructors, Ruth. Okay? Because it is going down to the wire. This is exciting.
Yeah.
We can give a big billing ahead of Abu Dhabi because there's just 21 points between McLaren and Ferrari. It is a pretty small gap. But do you see McLaren holding on to this?
Do you know what? I mean, statistically, yes. But, and there's a big but, I mean, if Abu Dhabi has taught us anything, it's like, do not ever assume anything is done until it's done. I think that's exactly how Ferrari will be. It will not be over until it's over. And I'm sure Delulu is the Salulu. Like, as in, there's, and I mean that in the best way possible, that actually the power of positive mental thinking is so huge. I mean, you just got to look back to so many championships where everything changed. 2010, for example, when Seb won, he was third going into the last race. And it was Ferrari were worried about covering off Webber with Alonso. There's so many things that can happen. Obviously, we don't talk about 2021.
No.
But yeah, there's so many things that can happen. One DNF, one things. I think it's not going to be done. It can be done. And I think both those Ferrari drivers are going to go in thinking we can still win this, because they can. And I think the McLarens are going to be like, this isn't done until it's done, because it's the same for them. And I think we're going to get a great show, regardless if you're a Ferrari fan and you're looking for your first championship. Since 2008, and then like if you're McLaren, it's like the 90s, so it's 25 years. So like that's the great thing, is that no matter who wins, it's going to be such a huge reward for either of those teams, which I really do love, actually.
One mistake, though, that's all it takes for a team to win or lose it really on the day. And it is McLaren's. Do you think they're going to be feeling, well, it's in McLaren's hands. They've got that 21-point lead. And really, they could have wrapped it up if they hadn't had such a, I guess, disaster at Qatar. But do you think they're going to be really feeling the pressure going into this? Is that going to affect them in a bad way? Or will they not think like that?
I think most people in Formula One that do those kind of jobs see pressure as a privilege. And actually, I give it the NFL example quite a lot, that, the NFL teams spend their entire years training and being away from home to get down to two teams that play in the Super Bowl. And one of them always loses, And so for the team that loses the Super Bowl, if you ask Pat Mahomes the year that they lost, when they got to the final, did you prefer that, or would you prefer playing practice in the thing? They always prefer a Super Bowl, whether or not you win or you lose. I think if you don't enjoy the pressure as a driver, you don't enjoy the pressure as a team, and you don't really see this as a privilege, and that they've worked so hard. They've worked for 25 years. There's people at the team that were there for the previous one, but the race engineers, Will and Tom, have been there since they're graduates. I don't want to put them on blast and say how old they are, but they're older than me. And they have been there through the dark days. They've been there since the back of the grid. And there's lots of other people that have been there for a long time. Wow. They're going to go in there. And I think they're really going to rise to the occasion. But I would say the same thing about Ferrari. It's the same thing. There's people at Ferrari that I know that have been there since the championship, that, they won the drivers and the constructors. And I think it's got to be like a momentous occasion. It's like going out to the Super Bowl. No one goes to the Super Bowl expecting to lose. Everybody wants to go and win it.
Ruth, gun to your head, who's going to win Constructors?
I think McLaren will win it.
Why?
Because I think they've got the fastest car. I think they should have, even if Ferrari can pull out a 1-2, I think they'll do enough to get even if they drop points, to be able to walk away with the win. And as an engineer this year, even though, you know, obviously Ferrari was my first team, I like it when the drivers goes to the fastest driver and the constructors goes to the fastest car, because I see it, you know, obviously there's, you know, you kind of hope that the car is operated in a good way by both like pit walls, pits crew, you know, reliability, stuff like that. But I think like the constructors should be rewarded theoretically to the people that design the fastest race car and the best all-round race car. And for me, in terms of, it's McLaren. And I think McLaren have really done a stunning job, especially with the aero regulations, creating a car that works in so many different platforms. Like, it's really rather clever. And I really hope that all the people we don't normally get to see on TV, all the engineers back in track, are equally rewarded as much as the guys that we get to see every week with the champagne. And I hope they're rewarded for building a stunning race car, because I think it's a better race car overall.
It is so fast, isn't it? And it's nice to see that McLaren have just really turned it around, haven't they? Like, they've been so good, sort of from Miami onwards. It's just been so good to see what they can do. They've been so impressive. Big party at McLaren if they win, for sure. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go to either party. Like, we're on neutral here.
Oh yeah, it'll be good. Further down the grid though, there's a battle that's equally as important between Alpine and your old team Haas for 6th place. Put into context for us just how important it would be for either of those teams to win sixth place.
So it's huge. It's like, you know, again, obviously, like, I understand that the championship is, you know, the kind of the top thing, but, you know, remember there's 10 teams, you know, we're going to get 11 soon. And we are away from our families if you're at the front or if you're at the back of the grid for the exact same amount of time. You know, actually, sometimes it's harder when you have a rubbish year in terms of performance, because, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of be away when there's a lot of celebrating, and it's really tough to be away when everything's miserable and the car is slow. You know, again, I don't know the exact financial situation of those two teams. I know for us, when we were P6, it was like our best result in 10 years. It was a difference between us having the budget to be on the cost cap or not. You know, it would have been better rooms, better flights, better upgrades for the next year. You know, like,
really?
It was like a huge achievement. You know, I remember at the end of it, we were all jumping into the marina in Abu Dhabi. We actually got Fred in trouble with the security guards, and the guys from Red Bull were like looking at us, and they were, because I think Red Bull and Mercedes were like the top of the paddock, and they were so confused. They were like, why are they celebrating? They came like last in the race.
Guys, you haven't won.
Didn't they come last in the race? Because, like, to us it meant so much. And I think you just have to see equally with like how much it means to you know, to both of them. I mean, like I say, I think they're both worthy to come out on top. You know, like, I think you see Pierre and just how stunningly he's driven across the season. Even
It seems like it's just clicked for him, doesn't it?
I think he's always been good, to be honest. I mean, I think Pierre's quite underrated, in my opinion. Both as a human and as a driver. I think he's great.
We call him Sexy Gasly on this podcast.
You can't see him like that. He's like a little brother, but I'm not very for that. But he is great. He is lovely. Yeah, same thing with the Ocon and the podium, and, you know, like that was just such a beautiful day, and a really great day for sport, because not only did we get a generational drive from Max, we got like the ultimate underdog story, and it means so much. And I have a lot of friends in Alpine, and I also have a lot of friends in Haas, and again, I think it's going to be, you'll see them celebrate, like, you know, and I hope you guys when you watch the race, obviously whoever wins out of the, you know, the race, so like probably you'll see the Red Bull guys on the wall if it's Max Verstappen, or the Mercedes guys if it's one of those drivers, you know, then you're obviously going to see like an explosion of orange or red depending on who won the championship. But like, look further down, I promise you they will look like they're running to the pit wall in the exact same way as if they just won the championship, because to them, probably their Christmas bonuses, you know, their worlds, it's a win to them. 5
points between Alpine and Haas. That is so close. I mean, that is exciting as well. Let's not forget about that. You're right. Everyone keep your eyes on them as well. Also, I can't believe it, but we haven't talked about Zhou Guanyu.
I know. Well, I was waiting for a crescendo so I could talk about my boy.
Yeah, we need to. So, Sauber's first points of the season, Zhou Guanyu, excellent. I mean, obviously we're not going to see him on the grid next year, but that is such a brilliant moment for him, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's one of those things about, you know, staying out of trouble. keeping it clean, they just would, they were there to pick up the pieces. And some people may call that lucky. For me, I don't. I think, you have to put your car there to be there. You have to not make any mistakes. Valtteri was actually behind him, without the fateful wing mirror. And I think that's the thing, is that it's not going to, realistically, it's not going to make a difference in the championship position. It's some flowers for them, and it's a really well-deserved moment for someone like Joe that, at least at the moment, doesn't look like he's going to be driving next year. And obviously I know both those boys very well, and they're both stunningly good humans, stunningly good teammates. Like I say, they never did anything selfishly in terms of ever putting their needs above the needs of the team, and good things that happen to good people. I'd love it if Valtteri could get a point by some way or form, even though we know the car isn't in the top 10. If there could be some weird scenario that meant that Valtteri gets a point in Abu Dhabi, then that would make me very happy. So yeah, well done, Joe. He really deserves it, and I can't wait to give him a big cuddle in Abu Dhabi. And say well done.
Oh yeah, do it for all of us, because I think every F1 fan was buzzing for him. Do you know what I mean? He deserves that.
Yeah, and his family was there as well, which is great. So it's always nice, when you get to have a great result, and if your family don't live close, to be able to be there to see you have that great result as well, which was it was really lovely to see.
Just so good. Before we wrap up everything, Ruth, and we say bye to you, we just need to talk about Abby Pulling, because unbelievable season that she's had. Congratulations to her, because she was crowned the 2024 F1 Academy champion. She has pretty much dominated it from start to finish. I don't think there was a race where she didn't get on the podium. No. I think I'm right in saying that. Just so good for her. How impressed have you been with her?
Oh, so impressed. Obviously, F1 Academy has just been brilliant, and all the girls are close to my heart. Obviously, Abby's Brit, so I kind of got to know her very well. And obviously, I work with Alice. Alice comes and works with us in F1 TV. Alice Power, mentor. And I think that across the season, obviously, Diane had that injury, but I think she deserves it. We said drivers' championship should go to the driver that drove the best across the season, and she drove the best across the season. There's some stunning performances from other drivers in the F1 Academy. So much talent, but I'm so impressed by her consistency. Never not on the podium.
Yes,
I often do the Parc Fermé interviews, and I was like, you again, Abby? I've run out of questions. Give me some content. I don't know what to say. Oh, great race. You led from the front.
You've done it again. Well done.
Yeah, now I know how they felt in the Max Verstappen podcast room last year. But yeah, really, really well done. And I'm so excited to see what she's going to do next year. Bigger machinery, more power. She's looking for it, and and obviously get to give her a cuddle in Abu Dhabi as well.
Yeah, because she's of course getting a fully funded seat in GB3, which is brilliant, because I think she's spoken a lot about how it's hard to get funding in sort of the women's motorsport scene, isn't it? And we've seen this season sort of a much bigger profile for F1 Academy. A lot more people are talking about it. Have you sort of noticed the impact in the paddock and more people talking about it, and also talking about Abby and how well she's been doing as well?
Yeah, and I think the fact that, the whole point of it is, you can't be what you can't see. It's about exposure. It's about making sure that, if you have dads and mums with little kids, that they take both their sons and their daughters karting, if they're interested in it. And, it's a numbers game. If you think about the number of kids that try karting versus the number that end up on the grid versus the number that are world championship material, it's thousands, tens of thousands to one. So if only 1% of the kids that try out are female, just statistically, the chances that they're the one that's going to make it to F1, they're the next world champion, is so small. It's about exposure. And, what the great thing has been about F1 Academy is that, you just kind of forget that it's women's racing, which is exactly quite is really nice. Obviously we'd love to get to a point where we get equal representation, or significant representation, and we don't need F1 Academy. It's a bit like the Hinge of racing series, the whole point about Hinge is to be able to delete it. The whole point of F1 Academy is that we don't need an F1 Academy.
That's a good comparison. I like it.
It's been really great to see the presence of it. I've been so excited personally about some of the brands that they've been working with. I mean, Charlotte Tilbury, like certainly for me as a woman, that's, as an engineer, you can be feminine, you can be non-feminine. I'm a particularly feminine engineer. I never thought I would be sat getting my makeup done in Charlotte Tilbury in a paddock, and that be celebrated, and that personality, part of my personality, not only be like, I didn't need to squash it, but it being celebrated, it being part of like, what makes me, valued and part of the paddock. And I think, the conversations that we all had about the fact that we all use the same setting spray, for example, other setting sprays are available. We got Christian to use it. It's great. It's very moisturizing when it's really sweaty. The hydrating mist saved us in Miami. But yeah, I think it's been so great to see like these big brands and realize that women's sport is bankable, because that's the main thing, is that, you look at the WNBA, you look at like exactly how much, revenue you can create. Like I went to the 500 this year, and I went to a Pacers game, and you saw the fever, and it felt the same. They sold the same number of tickets, like the crowd was just as loud. And women's sport is just sport, and actually like the more we can get in terms of great talent and great skill, we're going to get a better show, I think, and ultimately a more successful sport.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's so good to see women's sport across all the sports, like slowly starting to grow, and not necessarily comparing it to the men's, but just letting it grow on its own at the side and giving it the eyes that it needs is so incredibly important. I saw that Susie Wolff said that we should be getting a woman driving in Formula One in 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I think it's, like... as a wise man, Valtteri Bottas once said in our first ever strategy briefing, do not set a limit on what you can achieve. Whether you're a kid at home or a young Carter, like do you think that like Lewis or Max Verstappen ever thought like they'd be there? They've gone on record saying, I never thought I'd be a 4-time world champion. I never thought I'd be Sir Lewis Hamilton and winning 7 world championships. Nobody really like ever has a limit. So just don't put a limit on what you can achieve, and if you go for it, like it's the only way you're going to find out, isn't it?
I hope I'm alive and I get to witness.
What are you going to do in the next 10 years, Betty?
God knows. You don't know what's going to happen.
She's got knocked over, like she's just not looked left and right. This is peak Betty.
That's
Betty, please look after yourself, and that's what we need to. Don't get no accidental death. I think you should definitely be alive by the time we see a woman on the grid. Just please look right and left when you're crossing the road.
I hope so, because I'm going to be livid if I'm not. Can you imagine? Me sad.
Just think about that. Every time you go to cross the road, be like, women in Formula One, good. Look right and left.
Yeah, oh God, concentrate. Ruth, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for sort of going through that crazy race with us and joining us on our debrief. We are going to be back later in the week with a incredibly fun episode with Sam Ryder. He's joining us again, this time back in the studio. He is a huge Formula One fan. It's always really great to have him on talking about everything. And I'm sure he is going to have a lot to say on everything that's happened this season. And we'll, of course, be debriefing the final race of the season as well at Abu Dhabi to see who wins that Constructors. Ruth, you've been a legend. It's been so great to have you on. Have you enjoyed yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, hope you enjoy Abu Dhabi and you don't get up to any mischief.
Never. Just championships.
just championships. Well, we'll look forward to watching you on F1 TV. That's what you're going to be doing, yeah?
Yes, I will be.
Absolutely great. I can't wait. As always, send us your thoughts, feelings and questions. We're at Fast Curious Pod. But until then, goodbye, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching. Thanks again to Ruth Buscombe. What an absolute legend she is. We'll be back with all the build-up to the final race of the season with Sam Ryder. How cool is that, by the way? Hoping that he's going to sing us a song to get us in the mood. Before we go, you know what time it is. You know exactly what I'm going to say if you listen to this podcast all the time. It is time for another NordVPN reminder, because it is an absolute must for any Formula One fans lucky enough to be heading to Abu Dhabi. We use it all the time at the Fast and the Curious. Genuinely, we love it. to change our virtual locations, to keep up to date with all our TV and radio when we're away from home, when we're covering sporting events or going to a Grand Prix. You can also use NordVPN to help you save money when you're planning your next trip to a Grand Prix or just a holiday, because some flights and hotel fees change depending on where you book from. So, changing your location when you're sorting out all of your logistics could help you spend less, which is great, isn't it? And it's super safe as well, because NordVPN protects your data when you're using public Wi-Fi wherever you are in the world, including Abu Dhabi or anywhere else Formula One fans happen to be for the rest of the season. So to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/TFATC. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. And there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description of this episode.